What it, has taught me is, never rest on your laurels, always be looking around the corner of what's coming around the corner. And, just being very, very curious with regards to how do you need to continue to adapt and focus on what's ahead. But tenacity and being able to roll with the punches, that's part of what goes with the role of working in retail for sure.
My name is Buddy Teaster, President and CEO of Souls for Souls and host of the Repurpose podcast. Each episode offers candid conversations with business leaders and entrepreneurs who share the ups and downs, wins and challenges they face along the way, and how they learn to overcome them. These are real stories of real people going from tailspin to tailwind, and I hope you enjoy this conversation. Today, we get an opportunity to hear from an incredible retail professional. Doug Howe has been in the retail world for more than 30 years. The most recent role, and the one he's in now, is as the CEO at Designer Brands, which owns DSW, among other things. They're a longtime Souls for Souls partner, so we know a lot about each other, but this is the first time we've sat down to really understand the man behind that and what he brings to retail, from how he was trained, to his formative experiences, to what it means to move into a CEO role, what it means to lead through incredible transition, starting in COVID in his CEO role. He has a lot to offer, and this guy is deeply experienced in what it means to be a leader in a very complex, dynamic industry. I think you're going to enjoy this conversation. All right, our guest today is Doug Howe. Super lucky to have him here. There's a lot going on in the retail world, especially for DBI. But Doug, welcome. Thanks for making the time to join us.
No, thanks for having me.
So, makes sense probably to start at the obvious place, which is, how'd you get here? Like, I know the retail world has been a part of your life for a long time, but how'd that happen, and what was your path to DBI?
Yeah, interesting question. I was a business major in college, and when I started interviewing my senior year, I think similar to the experience I've shared with a lot of people, is didn't know that I wanted to necessarily pursue retail. I always say, like, kind of retail finds you as opposed to you finding retail. And that was definitely the case for me. I interviewed on campus at May Department Stores, which was a kind of renowned department store. May they rest in peace. But they had a really large training program, and interviewed on campus, and then got invited down to their corporate office and met with like a panel of assistant buyers who had been in their job for 12 months, maybe 14 months. And they shared like the amount of responsibility they had, the autonomy they had, shared that fact that like no 2 days are the same, changing priorities all the time, always looking forward. And I just went from being like kind of mildly interested to being like, wow, this job is created for me. I love it. And that was kind of the beginning of it. And it has all played out to be the case. Definitely love it. Fast paced, ever changing. And I think that's really exciting.
Doug, I didn't grow up in the retail world, but since I've been at Souls for Souls almost 14 years now, so many people talk about what May meant. And a big part of that was the training program. And that's not just there, but that's gone in lots of places. How is that informed who you are? And like, what do you think is lost with that not being here?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's a big miss. I mean, you get, have a conversation with recruiters all the time, and they share a lot of like, where are the next, merchants coming from and retail leaders, because the world's changed a lot. And a lot of those programs and institutions are just gone by the wayside, to your point. So what was appealing to me about it is it was a combination of, a planned program of training, but more kind of on-the-job experiences. And I just learned so much from, started as a merchant, obviously, that most of my career. And it's very much an apprentice culture. You kind of learn by observing. I always say I kind of form my leadership style as much from people you don't want to emulate as those you do. But, you're all, together and interacting in a way and, observing how you would handle situation and, kind of learning through osmosis in addition to the formal training. So I thrived in that environment. I loved it. And I do think it's a void, for next generation of leaders for sure.
Doug, so just lots of questions that come out of that. But one that, again, not growing up in this world, I always think about, there are leaders in the retail world who come up the merchant side. There are people who come up from like the fashion side, and they're increasingly came up from the finance side. And you were a business major. So how does your path fit into what other CEOs in the retail world are? Is it unique? Is it helpful to have that merchant background?
Yeah. I mean, I'm selfishly, I like to think it is helpful to have it. Our merchandising team may not think that is helpful. But in seriousness, I think that generally most of us start our careers and we're in like a function.
Mm-hmm.
And then as you kind of ascend through the organization, you have broader responsibilities for functions that there's an adjacency to, but you don't know deeply about that function. And I think that was one of the biggest probably transitions I made as a leader of like, when you first start your role, you kind of know like every single detail about everything that's happening in a business because it's fairly small. And then as those roles broaden, you have to really get comfortable of kind of knowing who to ask to get the questions or where to go to get the answers, but you're not going to be able to answer everything. And many people struggle with that. I know when I kind of made that first move from being like a buyer of an area to being a divisional merchandise manager, you struggle with it initially of just not having everything at your fingertips, and starts to trust you to rely on other people, which again is a pretty strong leap in your career as you're developing.
Doug, so May was the beginning, but I think you also did pretty important stints at Gap and Walmart, which those seem worlds apart. Like, so how do those different cultures and experiences inform where you are now?
Yeah, it's interesting. If you look back on it, I mean, it wasn't like a strategic intention, but I went from, it's say kind of a traditional brick and mortar department store at May. And then I went into a QVC Curate Group, which was like live, television, completely different pace. Everything is measured in dollars per minute. And when I joined, the business was just on a crazy trajectory of growth. So that was like very, very interesting. Then I went to Walmart and I led product development. So I didn't have a P&L role. I was over product development. So I went from kind of a traditional merchant, then a very non-traditional merchant in the digital space, product development. Then I had an incredible opportunity to go to Old Navy, and I was actually the head of design. So went from, kind of more left brain to more right brain leadership. And again, just a great experience of being able to work with and lead people that were creative. And then I went back to Curate Retail Group, and then I was at Kohl's as the chief merchandising officer before I came to DBI. So I've had an opportunity to work in a lot of different functions, a lot of different business models, but also, specialty, big box, traditional department store. So I feel very fortunate to have that diversity of experience.
So it's a great segue, not planned, but a great segue. So when you come to DSW DBI, which is now the public company name, we're not through COVID yet. Retail took a big hit for some of that time.
Yeah.
And now you're not just a retailer, you're a brand builder. Like how do you make that transition? There's a lot happening at the same time.
Yeah. And we have a very unique business model, right? I mean, the business is pejoratively retail, right? The vast majority of our top line and our revenue, our profit. But we started the brand organization through the acquisition of Camuto a few years ago. And I would say the similarities that I have from my experience is, even at May Company, I was in a traditional department store. They had a merchandising office where teams would work on product development and travel overseas to develop products. So always had that experience with regards to product development. And then at Old Navy, definitely the direct design. So it's kind of a perfect storm of pulling together a bit of those experiences that I had as relates to that. What's unique about DBI is the brands organization, or the wholesale organization, provides us with an opportunity to kind of have end-to-end. That team's responsible for designing and develop product, much of which we sell outside our own channels of retail distribution at DSW, but also they oversee the exclusive brands, which we sell only in DSW. So it's a really unique model that we believe we can definitely leverage for the future.
Doug, so I'm guessing, without knowing the details, that there some benefit that you just said, some diversification, some market knowledge, and I'm sure there's also some conflict about, like, we sell shoes, we're DSW, we're a multi-brand retailer, and how does that rub up against the fact that now you've got your own brands? And I'm a trail runner and walker, and Topo is one of my favorite shoes, and I know that's super different than anything else in the brand portfolio. So how do you navigate that?
Yeah, the Topo is a really interesting one, because Topo is very much specialty running, very sit and serve, high service model with regards to distribution, and it's a brand that we actually don't sell in DSW, and that's been very intentional. we've had lots of conversations with, our board, for an example, of say, wow, you could add a lot of revenue to Topo in very short time by putting it in DSW. And we have a phenomenal founder there, Tony Post, and he's had a very strategic thought process with regards to, at some point, that would be appropriate, but he believes there's incredible opportunity to continue to expand his business and run specialty, some of the big box athletic, before we'd actually make that decision. So what I love about that, it's a longer term strategic thought process, because you don't want to shortchange the opportunity to get into some of those other points of distribution before by prematurely going into DSW. So I guess to answer your question, it's like not every brand has a unique kind of position and strategy, and you just have to really respect that.
Doug, some of the brands that DBI has acquired over the last few years very much seem to fit into the DSW strategy, like being in the stores. Can you talk about how, was that intentional? Was that a byproduct of some of those decisions?
Yeah, I think the one most recently prior to Topo was Keds, and that one was very intentional. So we didn't have anything in our exclusive brand portfolio was in that athletic nor casual space. And in the course of less than 12 months, we acquired both Topo and Keds, both very different.
Yeah.
Both very in scale, awareness, kind of trajectory of growth. But one in the very much squarely in the casual space, Keds. One very much in the functional athletic space, Topo. So it was very, very intentional to round out the portfolio.
Yeah. Doug, those are pretty different businesses, and both sides, being in wholesale and retail. How do you spend your time between those two? Is it equally important? You said DSW is the lion's share of the revenue.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate to have a great team of leaders who are large. Who have Andrea O'Donnell, who runs the brand segment. Laura Davis is over the retail segment. So they spend the majority of their time obviously over their function, but we're very integrated. Andrea, for example, is over sourcing as well as logistics, which includes not only sourcing the product till we get it to this country, but also the logistics centers to fulfill product through DSW. So you have kind of end-to-end ownership. It's very, very integrated. It's somewhat complicated, but very synergistic, and again, a big differentiator. So, kind of based on what's happening with development, market weeks, I kind of pivot my time based on, where I feel like where I could add value, where my time would be best well spent.
Doug, when you came in, still in COVID, the longtime CEO, so you're replacing somebody who'd been there a long time. You've got the founder on the board still. Yeah, it's your first CEO role, I think. So can you just, I wrote this book last year. It came out called Tailspin to Tailwind. I don't know if tailspin is the right thing, but there was a lot happening when you walked in the door, and and DSW DBI is still coming out of that. So can you talk about that moment of walking in, and I'm sure you've done your homework, but there's still I'm sitting at my desk for the first day.
Yeah, great question. When I joined, and I started as a DSW president before I transitioned to the role of being CEO. So at that point, 2022, everybody was really coming back. We obviously have a huge penetration in the dress category within footwear. And I would say for the 6 months before I joined and then probably 6 months after, it's like we could do no wrong. Business was just firing on all cylinders. Customers are coming back to stores and a vengeance, and we were just riding the tailwind of that. That started to kind of do a course correction, I'd say, in late 2022, in the beginning of 2023. And I feel like there has been no normal since COVID. The only thing that's been constant is change. There's just one more disruption after another. I mean, last year was definitely marked by everything happening with regards to tariffs. So I think what it has taught me is never rest on your laurels. Always be looking around the corner of what's coming around the corner, and just being very, very curious with regards to how do you need to continue to adapt and focus on what's ahead. But tenacity and being able to roll with the punches, I mean, that's part of what goes with the role of working in retail for sure.
For sure. So we've had a partnership with DSW for a long time now. So from the outside, I've seen a lot of the changes that you've made and the team's gone through. How do you got a culture piece that you're trying to do? Like you said, you need people who are much more probably agile and flexible because of the change. And that's super disruptive, right? To bring in new people and try change your business model. So what was that like? I mean, where did you say, hey guys, this is where we're going? Or is it been more of a like, let's plan the next 6 months and then figure out what we're going to do?
Yeah. Too much that question, I'd say. The first one is around culture. What I was really impressed with when I started speaking in the interview process here was just our value set and how every leader showed up and they actually emulate those values. I think we probably all worked at companies where there's like a value poster on the wall somewhere, but then you kind of like, that's not actually how people operate. That was not the case here. We did a bit of a refinement and simplified our values, but it's pretty straightforward. We love what we do what's right, we own what we do, and we belong. And those really, like as I was interviewing, I could use those phrases to actually describe the people I interacted with. So that was really, really solid. That has not changed. I was taught a long time ago by someone is like, as a CEO or as a leader, you're like a steward of the company's values, but you don't get to change those values. You have to kind of respect and play those forward, which we definitely do here. And I would say, I have made different decisions based on kind of what's happened in the world, where we're focusing versus my predecessor. But I think if he would be sitting in this role, he would be kind of looking at the same, insights and changes and trends and probably make the same decision. I mean, the biggest one that we really pivoted on in the last 15 months or so is really, while we always want to be an omni-channel retailer and digital is always going to be a huge, important part of our business, we believe the biggest differentiator for DSW is our store fleet.
Oh.
Right? We have, 2,500 choices of footwear in a store. No one holds a candle to that with regards to competition. So like breadth is really our differentiator.
Mm-hmm.
So again, we want to be relevant in digital. You want to be able to be available where customers want to shop. But as far as like a differentiator that like your competitors, at least to date, can't emulate, it's really that physical brick and mortar store. So we're really leaning into what is that experience? How do we continue to leverage that? How do we continue to evolve that?
I love that you talked about being a steward of the values. And with that also is that you have to be the vision about where we're going, right? That you talked about the changes that you've been through.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about what it was like to go from the rough part of that transition to now talking about growth and the store fleet and where do we expand? I know you're closing stores, but you're opening and investing in new locations as well as what's inside the store. Those are different skills to be able to do. So how did you switch gears between them?
I think, again, just being curious. That's, people say, what do you think is the most important skill of a leader or most important attribute of a leader? I think it's to be curious. Again, always kind of watching what's happening in the world, starting to read the tea leaves with regards to where the customer's moving and that sort of thing. And again, we have a great team here of folks that are always, testing and innovating and looking at, new ways to continue to evolve. And you just have to really stay close to that. That I think in a nutshell is really, kind of the secret of success. And then once you start to see the momentum, how do you celebrate the wins with the team and really get everyone rallying around that single idea? We talked about COVID. This sounds, kind of crazy, but I always think about like what was the silver lining of COVID? And when, it kind of all settled in, what was unique about it from my perspective was, you have a little bit of PTSD when you think through those days of, we were closing stores and, what was happening at the time. But it created this incredible megaphone that everybody got rallied around, kind of locking elbows and like, what do we need to do? Because many companies were worried about their survival, right? Yeah. And all of the things that you were working on, prior to March of 2020 seemed really unimportant.
Yeah.
All the things that people are like, oh, we need to do this, we need to do that. I was like, you know what? None of those things really matter anymore. How do we all rally and really make sure they're all rowing in the same direction to save the company and save, all of our associates' roles, for the future. Yeah. So I think what, paying forward is like, how do you create a common vision? And, is everyone really, really clear on what is the most important thing we need to do? And, we definitely try to continue to remind the teams of that as well, because the power of the organization when you have everyone aligned and focused on your priorities is an incredible tailwind.
Yeah. Doug, go back a little bit to something that you mentioned earlier. I'd like to maybe probe a little bit into, so Chief Merchandising Officer at Kohl's is a big job. It's a big company, lots of stores. So like that's a senior role. What are the big differences that you expected and maybe didn't expect when you became CEO? I think when you came to DSW, the plan was that you were going to take that role. So that probably wasn't a huge surprise, but it's still a different job when it's, okay, you're the guy now. What were some of the learnings there for you?
I'm a big believer in this theory of T leadership. So if you just think of like a capital T, and it's like, how do you surround yourself with incredibly bright, motivated people, which I feel like I want my legacy to be the legacy of leadership that I leave behind in this company, and really, passionate about their own development and how do you continue to develop associates and leaders for the future. So if you think about that T leadership, it's like you have to fly at that level of altitude where like what questions to ask, but then you need to know when to go deep, kind of on that vertical as well. So that's kind of my, philosophy with regards to how to be a leader, is like surround yourself with people that are like functional experts in the area that they oversee, and then know what questions to ask, how do you provide support, making sure that you are very, very clear on the direction that we all want to go together. But I think that's the evolution of it, is like just evolving, like I said earlier, even in your career where you start out kind of knowing everything about the role you have and then just getting more comfortable being a little less comfortable on the level of detail. And it's tough. It's a tough challenge. You want to kind of know everything about every single topic, and that's just not humanly possible.
Right. Doug, and I know this is tricky because you're a public company, but are there things about being a public company? Clearly you were exposed to that at the board and things at Kohl's, but what's that like for you? How does that influence how you practice the T, or are you curious? Like some of those things can't be fully out there. Yeah,
I find myself to be, I'm very transparent, and I really, strongly value candor. I think the adjustment for me is, when you're a public company and you go through quiet periods and you're having calls with analysts, there's some details you just can't share. And I'd say that's a little bit of the opportunity. Is like you basically, I would love to just say, hey, here's what's happening. Let me give you the skinny on what's happening. And you have to resist the temptation to be able to do that and not overshare. So I think it's just that, that kind of precarious balance that you have to strike.
Yeah, I can imagine that being really difficult to do when you just want to say, if I could really tell you the whole story, you'd be curious about what's happening instead of they're idiots or they're geniuses or whatever their conclusion is.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a challenge.
Doug, one business question before maybe pivoting a little bit to some of the personal side of you. How do you practice curiosity? So it's one thing to sit at headquarters and ask questions. That's curious. It's another thing to be out in the store to talk to your front line folks or to customers or to vendors. How do you implement that so that you do stay informed?
Yeah, it's a good question. I try to spend, a lot of times interacting with the teams. I feel like I never have enough time to be able to do it as much to the extent that I would like to. But I think the most powerful thing for us is, and again, we have over 500 stores, is, spending time in the stores, walking the store. I 99% of the time don't announce when I'm going to go into a store because I don't want it to be like a presentation or something. I just want to experience the store like as a customer. And you learn so much from just interacting with associates. They are on the front line of interacting with customers every single day. And the insights that you get and, what they're hearing from the customers is so incredibly powerful. So it just, try to be a sponge. Try to absorb as much of that as you possibly can. And again, I wish I had time to do more of it, but I think that's true of being in our office as well, just like wandering around, popping into a meeting and people, that you're not invited to and say, hey, what are you guys talking about? Just because you learn so much from that, and, you can just get so much clarity with regards to, what the teams are working on, what they're struggling with, what they feel really good about. So again, that curiosity component, I think, is really, really important.
Doug, 500 stores, tens of thousands of employees, lots of folks.
Yeah.
Are you able to walk into a store and they don't know who Doug Howe, the CEO of the company, is? And you can just be a customer?
Happens all the time.
Yeah.
Happens all the time. Generally, when I'm in a store, I'll buy something, and then when I pull out my associate discount card, they go, "Oh, wait, I think
I know a Doug Howe."
Yeah, I think I saw you on a video or something. Yeah, but I try not to make a fanfare out of it because, again, I just want to experience the store as a customer would.
That's really funny. So when you and I first met, one of the things that we first ended up talking about was your passion for cycling. That bleeds over into philanthropy for you as well, but also I think lots of mental health, staying fit, all those kinds of things. Can you talk about what that looks like and then maybe tie it back to how you think it makes you a better leader?
Yeah, great question. First of all, it's a bit of a relief, right? We all have, high pressure jobs, back-to-back meetings all day long. So for me, that's a time for me to kind of just like recharge, refresh, kind of get out there. One would argue if you're recharging while you're out doing competitive biking, but for me, it's a bit of a relief. But the analogy I think is interesting. Is you think of and I do mostly road biking. You think of that as like an individual sport, right? You're generally doing it on your own. It's not a team. But when you ride with a group, or if you're in a competition with a group and you're in a peloton, which is a group of cyclists, I think it's a good analogy for it is more of a team sport. And, when you're like third or fourth back in a peloton and the draft that you get in the poll from the other bikers is incredible. And I just think of that as an analogy of like, how you're leading as a team. It's not you, it's the overall team. And the power of more people is much more stronger influence than my individual exposure is going to be as well. So I think that's really important.
That is a great metaphor. There's probably a lot to unpack around that. But what does that look like? I'm not a cyclist, so I don't know that. Are you out every day? Is it an hour on the bike? Is it 6 hours on the weekend? How do you incorporate, like you said, busy, your travel, you got stores in 2 countries and hundreds of cities.
Yeah.
How do you do it?
Yeah. I try to do, depending on the weather, and this has not been the most favorable spring so far for cycling outside, so I'll balance it with the trainer. But I try to get in 5 rides a week.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you do either a trainer or a Peloton, bike when you're traveling or when you can't get outside. But, for me, that's really the balance, 4 to 5 times a week, and then longer on the weekend for sure. And usually my oldest son is kind of got me into the cycling piece, and he and his wife and I usually do one kind of major event ride every summer. Last year we did a couple of them where we've been supporting Pelotonia in Columbus. He did that ride with me the last 3 years, and then we'll do like a big gravel ride in Colorado. One year we did Ride the Rockies, where it's 6 days of biking around the Colorado. Incredible ride. So like kind of one big milestone to add to your bucket list. We did the triple bypass a couple years ago, which, you don't actually need a triple bypass, but you may feel like you need one after the ride. But that's kind of how I balance out. It gives you kind of something to train for and something to look forward to as part of that.
So I have 2 questions, totally different. One, can you talk a little bit about Pelotonia? Because I love the idea of being able to tie philanthropy to something that's important. So that's one. But 2, do you guys talk about that? You gave that very strong example of the Peloton, and do you guys talk about that on your executive team? Like, do you bring that in consciously and transparently as a part of like, this is a way to think about what we do? Yeah.
Not as overtly, I'd say, on the cycling front. The analogy that we use on the leadership team is more, instead of pedaling altogether, it's more like rowing in the same direction.
Right.
So we have a lot of conversation about that. So again, it's a close analog with regards to, I kind of try to manage by a philosophy of, as a leadership team, divided together but united apart. And one of the leaders I worked for had a really strong point of view about that, and I love the concept, which is, hey, as a leadership group, we're going to get in a conference room, we're going to have a weekly staff meeting, we're going to talk about, the challenges and the opportunities of the business. Let's have a really candid exchange and conversation. Let's kind of agree where we're going to disagree, and have those, candid conversations as a leadership group. But then when we leave the room, what's the united message that we're going to be sharing with the rest of the team? And I just think that is an incredibly powerful way to think about how you manage that. As it relates to Pelotonia, I hadn't heard about it until I moved to Columbus, but just the amount of donations and the benefits that they've done to find a cure for cancer is just incredible. And it's the most well-organized biking event. I almost said race, but it's not a race because everyone can go at their own pace and their distance that they want. But the amount of funds that they've raised to support the James Center at Ohio State to find a cure for cancer is just remarkable. And you have way more volunteers on the ride day than you do actually people participating in it. And the last 4 years I've done the 100-mile ride. 2 years ago I did it on a tandem with my son, so that was a whole nother interesting experience.
That's a different podcast.
But when you get into like the 40-mile mark and you're going through these small towns and you have people holding up signs that say, "Thank you for saving my life."
Wow.
I mean, that is like full circle of like, wow, that's why we do it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible.
That's great. I want to go back to make sure I get divided together, united apart. Yeah. That is really good.
Yeah. I mean, I think we have opportunities to continue to emulate that, but we talk about that a lot. And like I said, I work for someone, happened to be a Gap, who had a really, really strong philosophy around that. And I just think there's so many benefits to that.
Yeah. I'm taking that one away for sure, Doug. So you want to start moving toward the end a little bit. You said something that I don't think we talk enough about generally in business, and that is how to leave well. We talk a lot about how to get the job and how to get the promotion or whatever those things are. We talk a lot about that. I'm 62. I'm thinking about it at Souls for Souls, right? I don't know how old you are, but you talk about legacy.
Yeah.
What are the things so you talked about leadership as one of those, but what are the things that you've seen happen well, you don't want to emulate, about whenever that time comes for you to not be at DBI, that you want to have put in place?
Yeah. I had an example of a place I work where you had a really strong leader that came in, and it was interesting because they had the support of the board, but they kind of like dramatically changed the business model in kind of a reckless way in a pretty short order of time. And you kind of reflect back on that, it's unusual. And then when a subsequent leader came in to replace that person, they said, let me be really clear. You're the custodian of this business, but you don't actually have the opportunity to kind of like make it be what you want it to be.
Yeah.
There's the DNA, and there's positioning, and there's a culture, and there's values that you need to respect. So that just really resonated with me because, again, I think, we come in and we're going to evolve the business and we're going to make changes, but you want to be respectful of the fact that there are culture, there are values. Those aren't very malleable. You should maintain those, right? Those are the differentiators of the company, and you want to maintain those. But there are definitely things that you want to continue to improve on. And again, I just think, having that philosophy of you're the custodian of that business, and my ambition is I want to leave, the place in a better position than when you arrived at it.
Yeah.
That's what I think about a lot.
Yeah. I remember a long time ago, this is not a name that we use much anymore. Lou Gerstner came in as the CEO of IBM in the 90s, I guess, maybe even before that. And things weren't going well. And so it was a lot of like, you need to go in there and shake it up and change. And I just remember hearing an interview, like, what are you going to do your first year? He said, nothing. Like, there's a lot to learn. There's a lot to listen. I'm not making any So I thought if a guy like that is saying about his organization, there's a lot to learn from that respectful approach instead of just, I'm going to come in and be the bull in the china shop.
Yeah, I think that's easy to say and hard to do, though. We have practiced this a lot with executives that we've onboarded, and we spent a lot of time. We have a relatively new CFO. He's only been here for a couple months. And I said to him, hey, for the first 90 days, like, just listen. Just like, don't feel like you have to come in and like make these huge changes. And he was originally initially taken aback, like, wait, what do you mean? This is like a big job. This is a powerful job. You need me to like put my, thumbprint on the business right away. I'm like, no, just like listen, ask questions, find a safe place. You can ask people. There's no dumb questions, right? Yeah. But I think that is really powerful because you sometimes have people, just because they're not informed, and they come in and they're, assertive leaders and they want to make a change, but it's like, just give them a little bit of runway to learn the business and, learn the people, before they do anything that's like unintentionally reckless.
Yeah, great. And you need to talk to enough people to form your own opinion, right? You can get one person who's really loud, and
Absolutely.
that could send you off in the wrong direction too, for sure.
Yeah.
Doug, so I want to wrap up with the question that we've been asking lots of our other guests. It's a little bit of a flip-flop of the usual question of, what do you want to be remembered for? What do you, in 20 years, want to remember about this moment in your life, professionally and personally, that, when you're 20 years from now, you look back and you go, that was really something special about that moment?
I think just to be remembered as somebody that operates with, high ethics and high integrity, and also having fun along the way. It's a very, very challenging business, right? Everyone's very much focused on driving results, but we try to also take time to, appreciate people, have a little bit of fun along the way. And it's more and more challenging to do that, obviously, when you're dealing with challenges. But I do think at DBI, we do a pretty good job of that. If people actually, again, they enjoy being here. We have an incredible opportunity because we have a ton of tenure and longevity here, which I think is a wonderful thing. People generally want to be here. They want to do the right thing. And I think that's just really, really powerful. So how do you make sure that you're encouraging them to, work really hard, but also have fun along the way?
Yeah, great. Well, Doug, thanks again for taking time out of your day. I know you got lots of balls in the air, so I really appreciate that. I appreciate the partnership that we've had with DSW for such a long time now. You guys are incredibly important to Souls for Souls. And so thanks for sharing your perspective on all this.
No, absolutely. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks for joining us on the Repurpose Podcast with me, Buddy Teaster. You can follow this show at buddyteaster.com/podcast, and you can learn more about what we do at s4s.org. If you like this content, please share, rate, and review our episodes wherever you get your favorite podcasts. And until next time, I ask you to ask yourself, what's your why? And how will discovering that help give your life a repurpose?